A technologist at Configura and a technologist outside of Configura Labs that often don't let Configura mistake like, hey, why doesn't this? Why doesn't that? Configura why are you being a jerk? Anyway, so it's an interesting dynamic because I came from the dealership where Chris, where'd you go?
I came from internet support, ISP support, so even more tech. Bench technician, so working on laptops.
And I think we find we have, so we kind of wrote this presentation separately and found we actually came up with almost all the same topics. And I think it's interesting to look at this from two perspectives. So we want to look at what can we do to help dealerships deliver CET design work. And you're going to see a PowerPoint made up of many, many words, something out of ADHD rattle brains. So don't worry about reading everything. You can leave this for actually have like marketing or shopping things. But we want to talk really about all these different topics, how to help you designers more effectively with these tools, how to help IT departments that are supporting these tools, where they be equipped to help you, and hopefully some strategies for working with your business leadership if you don't have the resources to get what you need to be successful with CET designer within your dealership. So does that sound good?
Yeah.
Yes.
What is dealership? Give me an example, please.
My bad. So, sorry, great question. Because yeah.
Okay, which industry? We're talking from commercial interiors industry, so
I have a wild bias because I primarily work in the commercial refrigerator. But CIT had never heard of a dealership before. They're like, oh, we're selling Chevys now? No, so a dealership is, consider a furniture dealership to be sort of like the dealer down the street selling Toyota cars or Hondas, right? They typically will align with a major manufacturer that provide services including project management, design, fulfillment, of course the products themselves, the design services. And the emphasis of this program is around those design services, typically using CTs. Does that help?
I'm curious, which industry are you from? Medical.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
right.
There's some relevance here. This is the general forms of education that will apply in your essentially. I'd love to actually catch up with you later talking about rental but that's for a future.
So yeah, and I also want to give our perspective from Configura how we come up with our requirements, recommendations, and what we are able to help them with. It's a partnership, really, what we do. And we're all working for the same end.
Yeah.
Trying to help the customers, help the users. Yeah.
All right, so let's jump into it. So let's just jump right to the first topic. So I think let's. All right, so I when I became an independent consultant, I used to work for a dealership. I was an IT director of Steelcase's largest North American-based dealerships. I also was brought into Steelcase's technology community of practice and design community of practice. So I had a really, in my case, a unique informed opinion about how dealer designers were using these technologies, and that really led me down the road of designing an IT strategy for my dealership that later informed how I advised dealerships when I started my own company doing technology consulting for dealerships across the globe. And so I would say the first thing I found was a lot of IT departments were not focusing on investments in avoiding problems. They were waiting till something broke and then fixing it. The problem with that is if you look at it from the perspective of hours of disruption, of course, it's not just the designer is now down, because typically a designer we're focusing. The IT person is now going to stop what they're doing to work on that, and potentially if their CS is down, like you have a serious compounding problem. And so a good IT strategy to support designers starts with productivity. So when I have designed programs to help IT leaders deploy CET designer dealerships, I typically start with you need to figure out how to build these workstations. First of all, get the same workstations. This is somewhat controversial. A lot of people like to buy one or two at a time, or hey, this one's on sale and cost whatever. Don't do it. I have actually retired more 6-month-old laptops in the last 2 years than I have in my entire career because not that they're bad, because the consistency of the hardware that we're deploying affects how they're patched, how they're managed, how we test them to make sure that things that are coming, we're reducing variables for IT so that IT can guarantee a higher service level to the client. So we're really trying to balance out how does IT function as a service provider, not as someone just saying no to that client.
And I'll say from my perspective, when we're dealing with something that ends up being an IT problem, the user doesn't always know. Designers, they have their focus, they have their and so they'll come to us, and we have to make sure we're doing our due diligence, that we're making sure we're doing everything we can to get the user up and running. But then it also, if we immediately jump to, oh, well, this seems like an IT issue, it also gives this dismissive kind of air to what we're saying. But it's not really that. It's, if we're identifying a problem, that's outside our hands. We're only going to waste your time if we keep trying to do something that IT would never approve of. So
one of the things that we have worked on, either within our, so we are a managed service, to be full disclosure, CIT and Aura is CIT's dealer-specific technology offering. So we sell technology services to dealerships, full disclosure. But yeah, we actually partner with Configura. When we get a call from a dealership that's having a problem, we're not just going to say, hey, just hang up and call Configura. Our techs will call and work with Configura on this problem. So again, it's reducing points of contact between the designer and getting their problem solved. And I will say, we don't need to go through that. Like I said, don't worry about writing everything down. I think this all being sent to you. I think the key thing is Configura has done a better job documenting the technology, sort of the attributes of the program that are required to be successful as an IT provider than any other application in the entire industry, bar none. Part of that was because that was the, this thing. And it was because I'm trying to do a good job here, so I didn't have to call you. So Configura has been really good about documenting things like the antivirus tool you choose potentially is one of the greatest performance killers of CT Designer because we aren't accepting the rules that need to be accepted to allow that. The application run. We'll talk about that in a minute. Anyway, great documentation, especially around selecting hardware. Configura was good enough to actually reach out to me to say, hey, you've been helping dealers figure out what hardware to buy. Let's talk about what the spec sheet says. And so they actually changed and increased the recommendations so that when you buy a laptop, it's good for not just 1 year, but say 3 years. That's giving our own sense. So, there we go. I'll let you jump in, comment if you have any thoughts on picking the right hardware for CET, because I have a lot of them.
okay, yeah, I mean, looking forward, not looking at the current recommendations, I mean, because people tend to assume the recommendations are going to be static for the rest of their life. But then, as technology progresses, we're going to push forward the capabilities of the tool. That's going to require more out of the hardware. So it's good to think ahead and actually look ahead at what you're going to need. Don't skip on local storage. We'll talk about that later because, like you're saying about access speed, to your files, there is no replacement for having the hard drive right there. You're eliminating all the variables there that could lead to not being able to. Yeah.
No, and one thing about CET Designer, and again, how many of you are designers in this room? Okay, perfect. I want to be respectful of different specialization things. So when we're talking about how CET Designer functions, it is a program that reaches out and pulls data from multiple different places. And so what you can find is the laptop itself should have a certain level of performance capability, but we're going to talk in a bit about dependencies outside the laptop because I'm waiting for it. This is it. This is my moment. The Ferrari on the dirt road analogy. So I have been giving advice to dealerships for 15 years on what to buy. And that is fraught with peril because often a dealership will say, oh, I'll go buy the laptop. And then, Jason, this laptop's not running as fast as you told me. Well, yes, but that's a part of the whole problem. So getting this right is key. One thing I would say is we have noted that the CPU, the processor in the laptop, is where your renderings happen. And when the renderings happen on the CPU on the laptop, we're going to see a great hack, by the way, to help fix performance here. You are just limited by how many cores of memory you have. Rendering offload is something that we offer. There is a free tool out there that lets you build your own. I would advise you somebody who rolled his own rendering solution. It is really expensive to do it yourself, and you really put me out of business, in fact. But it's a great way to save your designers a lot, especially as clients want more visual presentations. It's really does. So you can either pay us to help you with that, and that's what offload rendering acceleration is all about that I talked about in the presentation on the main stage. That's just much. I can tell you this too. The other thing that I focus on with dealerships is nobody likes big numbers. I'm learning to be a salesperson. I grew up advocating for designers, which gave me a really bitter taste about salespeople, and I don't mean that. Truly, it's like I wanted to be the anti-salesperson of dealer salespeople. And one of the things I tell dealer principals is, why do you keep buying hardware? And then it's like Mad Max. The back room, somebody's got a stash of broken up laptops, and IT is spending all this time fixing it. What I would recommend is a lifecycle management program that is aligned with a lease program. And we figure out for roughly $150 a month, you can have the best laptop spec to your professional grade Dell, HP, Lenovo, pick a flavor you like, and we can source it for you. Because we've actually created SKUs with HP that you guys go and order the same laptops that we order as a measure. I'd love you to consider buying them from us, but we don't want to obligate you. So anyway, what I'm getting at is, when you look at leasing a laptop for $150 a month and say, look, I'm probably going to save that designer 4 or 5 hours of productive time by not having a laptop rig, it pays for itself. Now, you go to a dealer principal and say, hey, I need $5,000 a piece For 20 laptops, that's a much harder conversation to have. So I have been very successful in helping dealer principals pick a lease option, which also forces them to continue to replace laptops before they break. Because the goal is we don't want to replace a laptop after you're having stability issues. We want to avoid them because they get most expensive that last year that laptop is live, typically. And this is based on probably 6 generations refreshing dealer design laptops in my operating experience. Take it for what's worth. But that's what I would say. The other thing that I would recommend when you're thinking about laptops is depot spares. Meaning right now we work with HP, we work with Asus, we work with a number of different manufacturers of both consumer and professional grade equipment. And if you don't have spare laptops, even though HP might give you a 24-hour guarantee, if a part is backordered, that 24-hour guarantee can be a month after they go on site and figure out the part backordered. So I would highly recommend like a 1 to 10 ratio for design laptops, buying hot spares and keeping them. Because that way your IT team has the equipment when you're down to get you another laptop and get you up and running. It costs something, but for the cost of 2 hours a month, that's an insurance policy most dealerships are willing to invest in so that their design fits. Don't worry about cost from an IT budget standpoint. Think about it from a productivity and a designer uptime standpoint. Because there are a lot of designers in dealerships, and that number can end up. I won't get into the argument about gaming versus.
Okay. I mean, some gamers are pros.
Yes, we talk about that.
But yeah, for hardware, the rendering performance stuff, we mentioned I did talk about. So we have a local network render accelerator, and that's something that you can install this applet on different PCs on your local network, and it offloads some of the render work over to these other PCs. One thing that I've noticed, and this is something that has even helped me in handling different issues at the same time, so I'm maybe troubleshooting a rendering issue while I'm trying to troubleshoot a symbol issue or a graphics issue with some extension. And I mean, I can imagine that you'd rather not have as much downtime if you're running a rendering where your PC is completely dedicated to this rendering. So what you can actually do is install this render accelerator on your own PC and have it as the only resource. So that's the only, you're handing it to your own PC, and you can dial back how many cores, so you actually throttle your rendering by doing this, so it takes longer, but you're able to use other programs. Because CET, what it's going to do when you start a rendering, it's going to use as much juice as it can get. And I had somebody who was saying, but it's a 9.9. How is this 9.9 slowing down? And it's like, well, it's using all of the capacity of the 9.9.
You go open your email, that takes a long time.
Yeah.
No, this is you can actually link if you install. There's 2 pieces of the solution. The render accelerator extension is something you download from the marketplace for free.
Yeah.
The render server is actually, if you install it, you can just link to the render server installation, and that is a great tip, by the way. Because again, if you don't have access, you don't have the money, you just want to keep your designer from being absolutely stuck and not able to work.
Yeah.
This is a really easy way to get past that. But it's going to take renderings a lot longer to complete. So it's sort of a band-aid, but it's a really, really effective one because not being able to work at all is incredibly frustrating. So by default, I love it. I actually, feature tip for the future, is it possible to default that down to 2?
Huh?
Anyway,
that's a good idea.
I'll submit that, Eric.
Yeah, like 75%
right
or 80%.
Yep, there you go.
So yeah, from the Configura hardware perspective, I mean that's something. The GPU heavy portion, so the graphics processor heavy portion, the real-time graphics. So when you're flying around and actually doing the design portion, that's going to be heavy on the GPU. And this is just a common misconception that the Photo Lab is actually CPU dependent. So that's
No, that's great. How many of you run are heavy CAD or Revit users? Not just for doing the simplification layer removal on stream, but how many of you really leverage Revit? How many have users? Okay. So the discussion of Quadro versus NVIDIA produces 2 main lines of graphics cards, Quadro and the GeForce series, along with 2 series of software drivers that go with it, which really is helpful. Generally speaking, CET Designer, unless this has changed, please correct me if I'm wrong, recommends the GeForce hardware with the game-ready drivers.
Okay, so we are going into gaming versus pro.
In the sense that this is actually when an IT person has to select when they've got to order hardware, and you can't change it once you order it. So you can pick the Quadro series or the GeForce series, and there's a difference in price and the memory available on that. But there's also two different sets of drivers. The only driver set that actually overlaps the hardware is the studio series driver. So there's two variables there, and the IT department just needs to be aware of it. Again, is the game ready driver the one that configures sports still recommends, or I think studio?
I still use the game.
Okay.
Right.
And that's fine, and that's good. But if you run AutoCAD, you need the studio drivers, because typically you'll get errors with AutoCAD saying, hey, this is a certified driver, we're having problem with acceleration, etc. So this is something that will be contextual for you if you're an IT person or if you're a designer. Your IT department's going to have to do some testing. Or both. Yeah, just change it out as you need to. But I have on the studio driver is something available with Configura. So in minutia, I apologize, designers, for going into that part. But for the IT people, it's relevant. Keeping those driver versions the same, starting from a common base, we found two different versions of Windows, two different feature releases, had almost a 30% impact in raw performance in CET Designer. I'm not sure what specifically, and we're not talking about the very latest. There's some patches in Windows that improve, I think it was anyway. The version of Windows, the version of the drivers you're running, and the version of CET Designer should be kept in sync between your designers as much as possible. And that could be a bit of a trick. There are, I believe, checkboxes in the license administrator to disallow updates. So some dealerships have actually gone about either having a single designer with a separate license that will test new versions of CET Designer with the drivers and such, and then IT will follow by doing patches to their laptops, and then they will upgrade CET Designer. So there is really a good defined process for keeping people in that same version. And we have found, I had a dealer that actually came to me to work with their MSP, and they had to build this program, and they saw an immediate, like 80% drop in support tickets from designers, almost immediately. So just standardization has a huge impact on this. So this is where I go back to, it kind of sucks to replace hardware if you have the myriad of different solutions one time, but every upgrade cycle after that, you benefit from this consistency. So that's as far as I would probably, storage.
Yeah, local storage. Poor hard drive.
Again, the graphic design majesty of IT people in PowerPoint. Ooh.
Just carrying way more catalogs than you can handle. So, and I had talked to you. I recently got 2 terabytes, and you were like, "Oh, well, that's like minimum." Yeah.
And we're not saying it. No, it's true. And this actually comes from a slightly different set of recognition we're talking about. But you're right. It's local storage. Once you've got it, like pulling the hard drive out of a modern machine and reinstalling Windows is it's not something you normally want to do. So buy enough to get through 3 years. So in 3 years, what I mean. Yeah. The guidance I actually talked to Gary and said, I wish you guys would move this up. And they said, yeah, I think you're right, because PBR finishes are going to increase catalog sizes. If you are familiar with solid state storage, if you have a rotational hard disk, I'm sorry. Somebody has failed in your life. That's not okay.
Your hard drive should not look
We're not in that. So we're talking about solid. So anyway, if you have less than 2 terabytes, I mean, really effectively, the problem with modern storage is if you get to a certain point, it actually becomes exponentially slower.
Yeah.
So you say
slower and it dies faster.
Exactly. It wears out. So you should plan to have 1.5. If you buy 4, you should plan to having 3 as well. So just you don't actually get that full capacity, if you will. And I'm going to spoiler alert something. There is a very significant way to improve CET Designer performance that requires more local disk, but it keeps you from having to cross the network with some of the files you work with. And we'll talk about that in a minute, because that is, in the last year, probably the single most important discovery we've made at CIT with how to improve designer performance. So wait for it. All right, let's get back into the...
Well, yeah, there are plenty of deals. I'm looking around the corner to Prime Day.
So 2 terabytes or 4 terabytes. Anything less, you're looking at upgrade very soon.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert. Oh, here we go.
Antivirus and updating. Yeah. So this is part of the problem, is that in some cases it'll technically still function even without the proper exclusions in place. It'll just run a lot slower, and performance is one of our toughest questions that we get, because depends on what you're working with exactly. It depends so much. Yeah, it depends so much. It depends on everything. It depends on your project. It depends on your computer. It depends on your IT environment. It's not even just the actual computer and what we can see and work with.
What did CrowdStrike blow up? Anybody recall? Was anyone in the airport when CrowdStrike blew up the world and blue screen everything? Oh, Sarah, that's right. So, and I say that because CrowdStrike was probably one of the most prolific endpoint detection response. So the modern version of what we call antivirus. It's intelligent machine learning. And when CrowdStrike blew up, it effectively became, persona non grata among IT people. Sentinel-1 became one of the more common tools that, as a managed service provider, we provide to our clients. Very common in dealerships. And you have to tune these rules, or Sentinel-1 does not like configuring. They have something against Swedes, or so, I don't know what it is, Ludovisk, I don't know. But it has a problem. But
it's umlauts. It's the umlauts.
It's
they don't like the umlauts.
It's spaces versus tabs. So we'll show that. Richard Hendricks. No Silicon Valley fans for anybody? Yeah. I just rewatched that, so I go up on stage and not make a complete fool of myself. I'm not sure how that worked. Anyway, super important. Yeah, and this is something that, again, IT has got to tune this and manage it. If you've got a managed service provider, they almost never spend the time, which I pride ourselves on. We spend the time, because if we're going to be a design advocates, we have to understand. So if you have a managed service provider, this is something that they need to read. There's a great outline, again, on the Configura website about all this stuff. So they give you exactly what executables need to be allowed through the security framework that exists. So,
and this goes back to also what I say about when people come to us and contact us, and I could talk until I'm blue in the face. It's one of those things where if there are not these exceptions in place, there is literally nothing, and I should not be able to do anything to get around that issue. It's there for a reason. Yeah, it's intentional. It's there for a reason. And so we're not doing a sort of on-off kind of thing. This is really, we try to do it, pass the baton quick. Okay, you need to look at this, because anything else we do could be just marginal. It could just be a tiny percent compared to adding.
And we had a ticket from a support technician at, I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good.
Oh, we had a,
No, you first.
nope, I will not.
Okay, so is there something similar for spec?
Yeah, we do have
Yes.
requirements up in place for that, yes.
Because we, at Goodman's, we get error messages all day long.
Okay.
It's literally the worst, and I feel like it could be related to this, but I need to see the logs.
Okay.
I'm actually looking at your before we should know.
Yeah, we really should.
Yes, we should. Yes, we should. But yes, so I will give compliments. Statler reached out to us. That was one of the IT people, or the textbook folks, and we got a ticket from Configura saying, hey, we've got this problem with the user. Here are these specific exceptions for spec, for CET Designer, and the firewall exceptions. And we found we had missed a couple that had changed. Oh, this is great. And we then deployed that change to all the design laptops that we have under our managed services, which is really nice. But again, very, very good documentation as an MSP who is, not all of our techs are familiar with CET as I am, but they've done a good job running it. So I don't know if you guys have ticketing systems in your dealerships or not, or a way for.
Made them create one for Goodman's. It's been a challenge.
We should talk. Okay.
And this isn't a comprehensive list. These are just some of the things that we'll see as a symptom, I guess I'd say, if that particular process is being shut down.
Yeah, but this is one of the greatest sources of slowness, the designer experience that IT has got to get right. So I would keep stomping on it. That's why it's on the screen so long.
I appreciate that.
So I see how many tickets you sent us. They're like,
Okay. Well, also keep up with the security patches as well. And the driver, we talked about this, the driver updates are sometimes backdated. They're actually older.
Right.
So it can.
Patch distribution, sorry. This is tech minutia, but most, even if you're a mid-sized dealership, you should be using a tool that allows you to deploy things like package and send out your driver updates, things like that. You don't really want users going and have to manually install this stuff. So if you need help or just some general guidance on that, love to talk to you. We do our consultations. I'm not charging just to talk to you, help you build goodwill. So again, if you want just some what works for us at a more technical level, we can talk about that and then move on.
All right. Hard drive hogs, and this is what I'm going to talk about in terms of if you don't have the space that you need, these are some of the things that you really need to start cutting back, which is unfortunate. So it feels like a controversial thing for me to say, to have too many extensions and catalogs. What I mean is for that particular storage setup. These are the only things that you really can kind of take out. Also, I'll add that Configura is working to improve how manufacturers can add in data and add it in faster, which means your catalogs are growing faster, which means you're going to need that 4 terabytes, maybe in less than 3 years.
Right. What was the HP to make a 2 terabytes back?
Yeah.
We're working on 4. Again, we'll work on just for those of you who order through Ingram Micro or TV Senix. We're working on building. Sorry, if you're not, we're building SKUs that can be ordered by anybody that meet the CET recommended and performance specs. We've got the recommended figured out, and I can share that. We're working on the premium, but yeah, it's weird. The hard drive was the hardest part to get into. You could go and order one laptop as a consumer, but to order groups of them through the distribution channels, it's really hard. So we're working on that.
Right, and I'll say auto saves and auto backups, which is also kind of one of those things. You feel gross saying, well, take away your, security blanket essentially in terms of, okay, if we do need to go back to an earlier version of drawing. But yeah, if you need to cleanse the auto saves and auto backups, that's where IT needs to be darn sure they're communicating with their users and make sure that they're not getting rid of anything that might be, oh well, that's still a legacy project, but we're still ongoing with this customer, or maybe, okay, we haven't heard from that customer, maybe we can free up that space. But yeah, also to set up a deletion schedule to make sure that you're not just loading the drives with.
We had a super nerdy conversation that I was super proud of a minute ago. How many of you that are designers, had a role in defining how your files are stored and organized wherever they are? And do you feel today that storage and that is sufficient for you to be able to find, retrieve, catalog, and to drop AI in the middle of this and say, hey, look at what I found? Now, what we have found, and this is, again, I will say this because I think most good MSPs are doing this, and we, of course, are not good MSPs because I wouldn't be a very silo. But before you start dropping AI tools in your environment, there are great readiness tools that will look at whatever file storage solution you have, including OneDrive, to help understand if you give this person permission to let AI go look at the world, and what does that person's permissions mean for what AI then tells everybody else in the company, like salaries, benefits, confidential goods, things like that. So anyway, I'll talk about this in a minute in cloud storage context, but the file storage solution you use is tremendously important, not just for performance of CT Designer, but finding your stuff back without being able to recover it. So we're going to get there in a second, but yeah.
I'll say also.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
And the thing I want to make, it also can affect using autosave and backup. So a lot of cloud storage solutions will do versioning itself. So you may be able to switch between using CTs, local backups of files, and using your file storage solutions' inherent ability to do that. But that has to be looked at by IT to confirm what are you backing up, how often, how much data can you use. So anyway, we're going to move on. We're getting into the weeds of really. I see the eyes going, man. You just talked about the thing.
The CET updates, so there's a clear previous versions now button that is a little more thorough than the actual, the usual cleanup that it'll do. So that's talking about when we release new updates or when manufacturers release new updates. Keep previous updates. You can uncheck that if the space is tight. The nice thing about that is another one of those things where it's like, okay, we don't want to end up in a situation where if something in an update has an impact on your project that you can't proceed, you need to be able to go back to the previous version of the extension. So, yes. That's a really good question. As far as I know, that'd be something you'd have to ask us on internal support. We'd have to find a way to do that. But I wish we could also cherry pick updates and just say, well, I just want to check this and update that. So there is sort of a wish list on, okay, this is what I wish we could do. But yeah, as of now, even the clear previous versions now, I think there could be more improvements on that. I know the office that I'm from, the windshipping office, that's where they work on a lot of those systems. So I kind of know the guy, so I can bring that back.
That would be useful to go because it's heartbreaking when one designer has moved forward in versions, edited a file, and now marooned themselves for anybody else being able to touch it. And if that version has a bug, it's okay. So that's a good idea.
Yeah, I like that. And the PhotoLab cache. So the PhotoLab cache that stores all the information when you click that render button. It's more than just an image. It's actually capturing, okay, this is where the light's coming from, this is the whole environment. This is way more, I'm not the right guy to ask about. We have people who work in the on the team that specifically handles the rendering engine. But it's saving way more data than just the photo itself. I notice a lot of people do a rendering, save their photo from that rendering, and then put that photo on. And that is a really good practice. Then you don't run into a situation where this cache gets emptied, because then you would need to re-render the photo. But if you are running low on space, you can limit that cache size so that you're not holding a bunch of renderings from older projects that end up eating up that hard drive space that you may need for updates, for saving your files, for.
I'm building a smart comment. Don't worry, I'm good.
That's all right. That's all right.
No, that's good.
And I do get a lot of. It's been more common recently that we get people saying my hard drive's full, and it's like, man, I feel like we just talked. You know?
Well, and this is a thing where so buying a bigger hard drive versus dealing with this every day as an IT person and as a designer. So this is where that idea of you put yourself in a scarcity mindset when you're ordering a laptop. The price of the hard drive is not. It's a portion of the price. Amortize it over 3 years, 36 payments, whatever it is. It's such a small amount of money. The one time IT has to pick one of these things and do it, you could have just bought the bigger hard drive from the start. And that's what we try to think. And it's not, I'm not saying you did it wrong, right? I was recommending science that was wrong in this case. I wanted to get people over the hump of spend as little as you need to get into CET design during adoption. But I think that is a mistake now. We're not dealing in a scarcity situation. Hard drive sizes are bigger, they're faster. Other than HP and Dell not liking us standardize on certain sizes of work on. This is great information on how to fix things, but man, your team has so many more exciting things to work on, right? So, anyway.
This is going to be you.
Oh, yeah.
This is going to be you.
All right, so the single most profound thing I noticed working with a designer, single laptop, the same exact file, clean restart every time, and we tried 4 different cloud storage solutions and their local storage solutions. And I will disclose, we sell Data Workspace. I didn't realize it when we started this testing, but I think there are certain attributes of a. So I'm going to back up a second. I want to make this something that everyone in the room understands without being. I'm not going to be condescending, right? I'm not a big fan of local storage, meaning I don't like file servers in dealerships. Typically, you're not built like a data center. You don't have passive redundancy. You've got to build additional apparatus around those servers to harden them and make them build. A lot of us put those things in data centers, but to some extent, you still run into the problem. There are great cloud storage solutions that incorporate. They will let you keep your drive letters because it is really expensive for a design organization to change the way they structure their files. All your XREFs break, your dependencies break. It's a pain. So if you're not ready to change your whole file storage system, you have to find, if you're going to the cloud, it's not the marketing pitch. I find that is the most effective way for us to get you your data. Data Workspace, when I tested it against VPN access to local file server, OneDrive, and Lucid Link. So there are attributes of those 3 things that do things that designers in particular really like. One is, you know how sometimes you're able to drag the file from your network to your local computer because it's faster? How many of you had to deal with that as design? 1, 2? At least 2. All right, that's hardly. The reason we do that is because it improves performance. What if the tool itself actually made the copy for you, and then when it got updated, it just kept it in sync? So you don't have to make all these local artifacts, uncontrolled data, copies of your files. It inherently just does that. And so it feels like you're accessing your data from your local disk, which is why you want the disk to be a little bit bigger because you have to hold this cache. But it had a profound, to the point where the designer was watching the 3D view move faster, just using a different file storage solution. Your IT department is welcome to and should validate this result. This was, 3 dealerships now I've seen this go. It works. So Data Workspace is a great solution. Lucid Link is a great solution. Ignite is the other one. And so I would consider looking at those. A lot of dealerships have used OneDrive. OneDrive can be a great tool. Curtis has a great tip on using a specific attribute of OneDrive store file. How many of you are using OneDrive or SharePoint to store your stuff? Okay. How many of you as designers, I don't want to pin things on solutions without knowing all the data, but OneDrive has certain limits on the number of files before things get real weird. And a lot of times OneDrive wasn't architected at a dealership level to accommodate that. At some point you just hit a wall. So I'm not against, we sell Microsoft. We sell more Microsoft than anything else. But I found that the OneDrive has worked well for other things, almost the internet related files, but not the design files. One of these other solutions work better. What I also like about something like Data Workspace, if we have a failure, we get ransom, whatever else it is, using a traditional backup solution, I'm making a copy of my data somewhere else. Well, if I lose my primary data, I have to copy it back. And that can take a long time. The last deal I know that got ransomed took 3 weeks to get their data back. With these solutions, typically their data is what's called snapshotted or backed up. So you could just roll back before whatever happened, stop the thing that's happening, and you have live access to your data in an emergency right away. So from what in an IT terms we call RTO, RPO standpoint, this is profound. It's really, and they've almost baked in the storage and the backup capability that you need. There's other reasons to copy your data off for protecting yourself from a bad contract, but this from a dealer standpoint and keeping designers running has been probably the most important way that we've helped them improve performance and helped IT departments simplify the stuff they're supporting versus keeping server chemicals. Does that make sense? Okay, cool.
And cold storage, I mean, what I can speak to on that is the effects that we see, sort of the symptoms again. So sync issues can cause these access issues. So map letters to network drives, don't rely on the shares. I know you talked about, which one was it that?
Yeah, both Data Workspace, LucidLink, and Ignite will honor, like if you copy a file from X to whatever it is, instead of making you change the file path, all of those will allow that. So if you have an existing local file storage solution, it's super easy to migrate to these solutions because you don't break all those file paths. The designer has no idea that the extra item they saw on Monday was not the extra item they saw on Friday.
And CET doesn't know either.
No, plus it eliminates a massive amount of work, and I have seen ungodly amounts of design time burned up after making a file migration, well intended by IT, but there wasn't a full understanding of what that was going to mean for that designer every single time they opened the file. And they get a lot of complaints in IT, didn't understand why, and we don't want that. We want to do a good job.
That keeps things pretty exciting for us.
Oh, it does. We don't like exciting IT. We like smooth. We like doing showroom tools. I like it.
Yeah, but yeah, here are some of the common locations where we have sync issues. I'm sorry if it's a little small. Again, this is going to be on.
We'll send this out soon.
Yeah. But yeah, if CET documents is not syncing, it's going to reset the preferences, which has the following. It resets your keyboard shortcuts, your custom catalogs path. The thing that we usually look for on support is, I swear I checked to keep me logged in, and it's asking me to log in every time. Well, that's because it's not saving the preferences. So it's not remembering to keep you logged in that case. Recent files list is also empty. That's another thing. That's a pretty big jump out thing for me. If I jump in, it's like, oh no, this isn't your first project ever, So when it comes to that, and I actually will show, and this is something I'm not going to go through in detail, but we do have ways to restore backed up preferences. So we do have ways to restore the preferences. They're not totally gone. And
this is tremendously important, by the way. If your IT department ever has to switch your laptop out, for the IT department to know where all that data you have is backed up.
And we document that as well.
You do.
Where they are.
You do. So that's a great goodwill thing for IT to do, is to make sure that we're doing everything we can to avoid them having to go back and create their schemas and favorites and all that stuff.
I actually, we put together an article that was basically how do you migrate over to a new computer.
I'll totally credit for that too.
Yeah. So. Next to that is drawing file and project location. So you'll start seeing errors of saving and loading, or just slower saves and loads, which you can see is, like you're saying, maybe stuttering when you're actually working on the drawing. We do is
It was very eye-opening to actually test. I mean,
it's crazy. It's crazy to see.
And watch them react.
Yeah.
I had no idea this could happen.
Or that, I don't have to deal with that every day.
Well, I would tell you, I thought the designer was part of this conference. It was interesting that we worked with the designer, and I think she felt incredibly, like, she was like, I get to be part of this process. I think it was, for us, it was good to build a relationship with a client that wasn't being heard by a bunch of departments. I found it intellectually interesting. I like the testing. That's why the render server thing was a weird obsession. And this was the same thing. Wow, it's simple things that we may take for granted in our daily operation of IT have a profound impact on their experience. And if you've got 20 or 30 or 60 designers, the economy of scale of things changed tremendous.
And here, this is something to do with spec that we see errors pop up because maybe the license file is being locked up. We even see the same thing with spec project files where it'll say it's already open or in use by another user. That's not the case. It's just a file that's not being released or not being synced over properly. And it's making it give you an error that looks like it's already in use.
We fight in our design department.
Okay.
To get out. We actually want out of OneDrive.
Okay.
But corporate level has dictated that's not happening.
Okay.
And I would like to present these other,
other options.
You have a very unique file source. The most unique file source I've ever encountered. And I don't mean, I've never seen it. It is OneDrive dependent, and it is, to me, it is a budgetary decision around managing costs, not managing value. Because your design team among all the would probably benefit.
Unique is such a loaded word.
We struggle with it.
Super handy when the CT conference is actually held in Arizona. Hey, wow.
Yep. So, and I also want to understand that I have much more background working at CET. So I worked at Configura starting in 2015. So it's only within the past 3 years or so that I started supporting spec and notify. So I'm trying to like retrain the brain a bit, you know.
Yeah.
And then you got the new stuff.
Yeah, new stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But yeah, that's where maybe I mean, these concepts are going to apply. I just may drop the CT more. But yeah, any extremely long file path. We deal with this, and actually, I created a really long file path, just some extremely silly name. Tried setting a bunch of different things to actually use this path to see how many things broke. And I thought I reset all of those things back to the defaults and the proper. And then the next day I came in and I was like, why is my CT just... it's not even opening. And then I reset my preferences. And I was like, oh yeah, use the path.
There is a
stupid.
What is the setting? There's a
Yeah.
file setting in CT design that does file
The mirroring, yeah.
And that's where I ran into the file path thing. Yeah. Because our design department had created this tremendously long file paths, and it didn't broke it. We did whatever the limit was, we found it.
Because what the mirror does is whatever you set as the root for the file mirroring, it then creates that structure that you're talking about. So then it'll create like username that it goes through. So you're basically, for every file that you're saving, it's adding on even more. And then you start adding time. Don't use it? Okay.
No, I would say, and in some cases, I would say if there's all else translation. So here we go.
Yeah. Well, but again, it's one of those things that, you know, it was put in place in a time before those solutions were available.
And it was great, yeah.
So it was a means to an end.
Your auto backup, I would say, by the way, it has saved a ton of designer time.
Yeah.
So there are dealerships that have no IT department at all. And in those cases, these tools are tremendously valuable.
Yeah.
The file mirroring in CET does the thing we talked about, where it's making essentially a local copy of your data. So you don't even have to go to a cloud-based solution. You can just use it. But if you have a really complicated file structure, so it's again, for IT and design to come up with what is the right process to support the business.
Yeah. So yeah, this is something that you can restore your preferences, and then the common pause and prevention of this is a file being locked by the same process. So you can either move the CT documents outside of OneDrive, or if you don't want to move them, you can actually set it to always keep on this device. And that's something I'll touch on. It's a setting for OneDrive. Yeah. Let me see. Yeah, I can go through this real quick because you actually have a slide that says movie. But I do see it a lot. This is the thing. This is from my perspective. Exactly. I see a lot of VPN, so it is out there, and you need to confirm the following: confirm that they're able to log in. That's a pretty basic requirement to working. Ensure that the downloader is able to run and write. So we use app data local, and that's one that gets flagged by a lot of security, and also gets flagged by oh, I know the umlauts. So pin the downloader and notify to be visible in the system tray. So the system tray is down by your clock. Use that little caret dot arrow to drag it down, and then it's always visible, or should be. If it's not visible, then I know, oh, that's not running. So I need to get that running again. Double check the project folders and profile, again, for the reasons I outlined before. Those are the symptoms that can come up. And VPN also becomes a bottleneck for the save and load times. So everything else could be, and that's where we get into that IT environment thing.
Yep.
I mean, there's a certain amount of, getting a layout for the system that we have time to do on support. But it's one of those things. It's kind of not my business how your VPN is configured exactly. I mean, there's even deeper, the proxy settings. I had one where somebody couldn't log in, and it was just a proxy setting in Windows. that I had them check with their IT. They said, yeah, you don't need that. So they turned it off, and bam, there it goes. And it's like, yeah.
Well, I would say, I mean, looking at this from a strategic advisor standpoint, so there's IT guys. We're going to argue commas and spaces, spaces and that. But in this case, VPN is often a technology that it was more relevant when people were working in offices and your stuff was all in the office. So it's a way to connect securely from your laptop to typically a network firewall. But if you're moving into, for example, our company, we're a tech company and we're audited CMMC. We're on all the alphabet soup components. We don't use VPN at all. We use Zscaler. A zero trust model for our machines. All of our stuff is cloud native, et cetera, et cetera. So we find that is tremendously it's less expensive to manage long term. Overall, it gives users a better experience. It's cleaner. But again, if a firm has not updated their network design, their IT strategy overall, they're going to have to deal with this. So I do say if you're still using VPN, it might be time to think about a more strategic overview of how are you consuming those services.
I would say in 2020 for various reasons.
Yeah, well, yeah, the pandemic did create some. We need to get everybody to work from home in 2 weeks. Go
safely somehow. Yes.
So kudos to all the IT people who survived the pandemic. It was one to create basic shifts. I mean, we designed everything for one way of working, and then got the rug pulled out from under and said, "How cheaply can you make it work like this and fully modern?" So if you're lucky, you got ransomware because then you got the budget to actually upgrade your infrastructure. We'll talk about that. Right? I was working with Steelcase too when they were getting hit. That was a full supply chain attack that started. And it's not a rip on Steelcase. Like I've seen other manufacturers do it. I think that is. You guys are up against a really tough fight, having very little money to do all the things that you want to do. It's tough job. Tip of the hat to y'all.
And I'll say soon CIL login, so spec notify. Those will be handled by the My Configura account as well. With login so yeah, we're finally getting to where it's not.
Wait, are you going to move to single sign-on for Configura?
Essentially, you're putting these words in. So, but yeah, I mean, essentially, that's the direction we're heading. So we're trying to make things simpler. Make it easier to find out where the problem lies, and also, I've never been super excited that we use the Configura logo on something that has a login.project matrix account, because that's just like total misdirection for me. But yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Do you have a timeline? Thank you.
So I think we're going to introduce the back end to it.
Okay.
So we definitely want to just make sure that everything is free. We've got it out in the open.
That's my boss, Allie.
Yeah.
Round of applause. With the good news. So with the good news, November is the plan. So yeah, I'm excited.
That's cool.
Yeah. And here it is.
Oh wait. Okay. So we actually just talked about this, so I'm not going to go back into it. But
okay.
These attributes, just grab the slide again. You all know your business. It's I would say, by the way, thank you for we're almost we're not.
We're getting.
We have about 5 minutes. How much do you guys have questions you want us to address? I want to make sure we remember. Back here, so we try to wrap up the hot takes that we have on technology.
I can't talk faster. I can't speak.
It's my other calling in life. All right, let's pop to the next one.
Okay. And
well, we hit this hard, didn't we? So this again, when you take two heads, and I did have another. So full disclosure, we have an incredible technician at our team. He's incredibly invested in helping discover ways to make design more effective. I'm thrilled. He unfortunately got COVID, and got COVID right before he left, and had produced most of the content which I didn't get before I came. So poor Curtis, they're like, well, let's just write our own PowerPoints and smash them together with 2 hour prep. So really grateful that Curtis was willing to work with me on that, but yeah, there was some redundancy.
Yeah, but
this is really great though.
Here's the tip on OneDrive. Always keep on this device. That's the one thing that I go in and check for the CT documents, the project matrix, my documents folder. Anything that lives in OneDrive, they always need to be accessible. It's going to speed up performance on that. It's going to reduce errors on that. Because again, I've seen people where, they're running low on space. What does Microsoft do? It decides, oh, well, we're just going to shove that to the cloud because you have the cloud space, and we're going to take it off of your PC. And so then other software doesn't have access to it right away, so it resets. So cloud storage is not a true replacement for having sufficient
I have another random hot take. I'm sorry.
All right, yeah.
One of the things that I have just recently found. Oh yeah, sorry. My hot take.
Yeah.
Challenge to go from everything to.
It ain't easy, but
Hmm.
it gives you tremendous flexibility and skill. So I've got some dealerships who are moving out of the. So real estate challenges or real estate resizing is affecting all of our clients. And I've never seen so many dealers trying to relocate themselves as I have right now. And so a lot of them have legacy physical infrastructure, which is what the VPN is required to access, is moving. And in many cases, this is that time when let's just go cloud native with this stuff because now we don't ever have to move it again, unless your cloud provider is a contract problem. But yeah, we move the problems to different places and solve them. But generally speaking, it's we took. I'm trying to think how long it took. Yeah, let me talk to my engineering team and just ask for them. We moved to what we call Zscaler, the solution we picked. But we have no domain controllers. We have none of it. We use Okta for our authentication. So we use, again, I talked to the technical people in the room about the specifics, but I think it's a worthy undertaking, especially if you found really, really good cloud native storage solutions. But it does in part depend on what your compliance requirements are from your customers, because that should drive your IT strategy first and foremost.
Question, Gordon, how are you estimating the cost
Around which part?
of access? So
It's-
many cloud storage, how are you, many times you access it? So
It depends. So like something like Azure, where you're talking about ingress and egress fees, all the solutions that I put up on the screen actually have essentially, they don't charge those fees like a Microsoft Azure might. So I believe LucidLink, for example, charges a per terabyte and a per user fee. Data Workspace is a flat user fee, unlimited storage. So depending on if you're sizing for a large number of users or a large amount of data at rest, you don't have those sort of. So what you're referring to is really important. If you're looking at, I think Amazon EC2 charges what? Not only are you charged for the amount of data you have, you're charged for the number of times that data is accessed, moved, retrieved, etc. And it's almost an unpredictable cost. And you can get whacked with a huge bill for it. So that's actually why I haven't driven a lot of clients to that storage solution, because it's very expensive. It can be the right solution. In some cases, if they're setting up actual cloud servers, we'll use Azure servers with Azure storage. But for day-to-day daily driver files, we'll use one of those other solutions, which effectively eliminates that cost. But it's a great question. Does that answer what you're doing?
All right.
Oh, yeah.
Silent installs.
I didn't realize this was a thing, which is I'm like, oh, and then of course I'm going to really, if you're doing workstation builds, I don't know, Smart Deploy, pick your tool of choice. Super useful for doing your builds as an IT team behind the scenes. So your designer gets an almost complete laptop, which they then log into, complete their installations. We always schedule our installations for a designer, the upfront setup, make sure they get the laptop, everything's configured right, let them install the applications. I haven't mentioned Threat Locker yet, but if you're fighting the admin rights issue, you need to get Threat Locker. It's amazing.
I'll say for now, CIO applications are installed by EXE, but I've heard that we're moving down. So, Allie, do you know if there's a timeline on that? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So it's on the radar. It's not maybe. Yeah. Yeah. You had mentioned Threat Locker and Auto Elevate.
Yeah,
Those
this
are
goes,
awesome.
I was bludgeoning Configura about this, and I was for years. So it is not reasonable to expect that Configura is going to, admin needing to elevate permissions to install software is simply phenomenal. And I would say I fought this, and then realized, look, Auto Elevate is another tool. There are tools that allows IT departments to make exceptions when a client says, hey, I want to install something. It stops them and says, wait a minute, let me look at this. The great thing about Threat Locker is it allows a designer to start installing something, get the question, hey, what's going on, send it to a managed service that will within 10 minutes look at it, analyze what they're trying to install, make sure it's not a risk, and allow them to proceed. And I always try to look at this from the designer's point of view. I'm working on a Sunday, it's some weird hour, IT may not be staffed at that moment in time. If I have to wait to get a hold of an IT person to get a permission elevation, or God forbid, we're all running around with admin rights, because that puts designers in a really tough position. If they make any mistakes, they can compromise the entire company's data, which is not a great thing to send people out in the wild without totally protected. So this is a way for, I fought with this for years as an IT director in a dealership. And so Threat Locker, which again, we do sell, I'm not saying you have to buy it from me. It is an amazing tool for this. It adds an additional layer of security to your endpoints. I think when there were various zero-day attacks, even through Microsoft's own update tool, this wouldn't allow them to run. So it's a great security tool on its own, but it has a really, really great synergy with the needs of interior designers running CET Designer. So I highly recommend you look at it. Auto Elevate is a similar tool, but it requires a lot more management from IT. So if you're looking at your total operational cost, ThreatLocker is very inexpensive to operate as it can be zero cost if you buy it from an MSP fully managed for you. If you manage it yourself, it's fairly low cost to manage, which is why we get to be offered more price. Auto Elevate is more high touch for IT, but it can achieve the same thing. So, anyway,
and I'll say, considering trust with us, if you grant us admin access via login, we are trained to do this. We're trained to investigate and not have an impact on the decisions that the IT strategy has made. I'll say one of the worst moments is if I log in on a machine, don't have admin privileges, but I forget that I didn't have admin. I launch the task manager. It pops up over the chat. I can no longer pull the chat forward and tell you, hey, I'm locked out of your computer. So if we're remoted in and you're sitting there and it's just the task manager, we're probably just sitting there like, what do I do? How do I reach them? Should I email them? Because we're locked out at that point. We're frozen essentially. And even if we write you, then we're not. Yeah, get to you.
I should say you got IT first, but I was, I traveled in the 70s. Do you as IT people want Configura making driver changes on your laptops, or would you prefer that they escalate the ticket back to you as an IT provider to deal with that and keep them on the sort of thing? Now, I'm not saying it's disparaging.
No,
because that's a huge responsibility. If we break something, it's like, you broke it, you bought it.
Yep.
And so they've changed their strategy. They used to be,
escalate it back. Yep.
Warm escalation.
Fantastic. Yeah, fantastic.
I agree. So I think that's.
If we upgrade something and we have no way of repairing it.
Yeah.
Is there a way that a dealership, like from an IT look, so we usually were in the license admin portal. Is it possible to flag an account to say, if there is that kind of work being done, please escalate to contacts listed for the support team, so they know who do I get a hold of at the dealership if I need to do this, so I don't take action. Because now we do get into compliance situations where I'm letting an outside entity make changes to workstations. I've now broken my audit, whatever it is. I mean, we're thinking about it.
Yeah.
We are.
Well, I mean. Okay. As I say, this lines up for the last sort of wrap-up slide. We have the same goals at the end of the day. Like I mentioned at the start, we're trying to help. We're just trying to help. Sorry, HA, remembering that. We're always trying to help. We're trying to identify when local IT needs to assist. And so we just need to lean on each other. Yep. And you can reach us.
Look at that giant head. That thing's even bigger on the screen than it is in real life. Woo! Thank you very much. I want to shout out to my fellow IT folks in the room. It's a tough job. Love to talk to all of you. There is a technology advisory board at Configura, which I'm a member of. So if you have concerns, have questions, I'm glad to advocate on behalf of dealerships. I'm not aligned with any manufacturers. It's purely on behalf of the community as a whole. So would love to network with you, talk with you. Curtis, again, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Shout out to you guys. You guys do tremendous work. We appreciate it. And designers out there, thank you for letting us serve your needs. Have a great day. Oh, I have cards. If you like cards. Or stickers.
Yeah.
Stickers. I'm very animated.